webinars are recorded and they're made available to ACP members on the ACP website. And if you would, please help us out. If you have an idea for a webinar topic, send it to staff@acp-international.com. Our guest speaker will be taking questions at the end, so please post them during the webinar in the question box in your control panel throughout the presentation. We'll get a response to you for any questions that we're not able to answer during the webinar. Sometimes we run out of time. We're thrilled to have with us today Ed Schlichtenmeyer, StormGeo's Senior Business Continuity Manager. Ed is a longtime ACP member and has previously been a presenter in our webinars. Ed is going to discuss how to weather the storm before, during, and after an event using business continuity best practices. He'll be walking through key weather preparedness tactics and business critical readiness advice that you can implement right now using time-phased responses. Ed Schlichtenmeyer manages business continuity for StormGeo. A veteran of a variety of disruption responses, Ed assists StormGeo clients in readiness activities that include business continuity program management, as well as integrating weather data and response planning. Ed functions as the loss prevention and risk management subject matter expert for StormGeo and its subsidiaries, and routinely briefs division directors and executive management on the status of its continuity programs. In his role, he also manages the response efforts to incidents that disrupt normal business operations. Prior to joining StormGeo in January of 2010, Ed was the manager of business continuity at Devon Energy and vice president of operations at Cal Data Systems. He served on various as-is working groups for standards development, sat on the ACP Planners National Leadership Conference Committee, and worked with the Mayor's Houston Community Preparedness Collaborative. Ed is the past president of South Texas chapter of ACP. Please join me in welcoming Ed Schlichtenmeyer. Good afternoon, Ed.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Ed. That sounded really good. I appreciate that, and I appreciate getting the chance to visit with you again. Yes, my name's Ed Schlichtenmeyer, and I'm here to talk about weathering the storm time-phased response plans. It's incredible to me over the years that people have just continued to blame the weather and not do anything about it, not realizing that there is something that they could do about the weather. Now, I'm not talking about preventing a storm from coming in or stopping the rain, but I am talking about steps you can take to mitigate overall impacts that weather could cause. So today we're going to look at just kind of a general introduction of what weather impacts we've experienced over the last few years. We're going to take a look at the risk assessment process, and then I'll walk through some time-phased response planning and those sample actions that might take at certain times. And then we'll wrap up, and as Ed said, we'll have some questions at the end. So I think all of us, since we are members of ACP and interested in the profession, know that weather does impact business through disruption. Severe weather is the leading cause of business disruption. We've got all of these surveys and industry reports pointing to that. But what do we wind up doing? By and large, out there in the community, they just simply blame it on the weather. There was a bad spate of thunderstorms, or that was a big flood, and I don't know what to do about it. We also look at the fact that weather impacts business revenue. In the Houston area and in Texas in general, this last Q4 of 2015, retail sales were down because of warm weather. Then we turned around in Q1 of 2016 and said retail sales were down because of cold weather. Liquefied natural gas down 42% in Asia due to warm weather. I mean, El Nino is going to cause flooding. La Nina is going to cause drought. All of this hits the bottom line and impacts revenue. And it's a global activity. And again, managers are still filing reports in their annual reviews that blame the weather. And the fact is, there are things we can do about it. You can do what you're trained to do by doing risk assessments. Some things include climatology reports for your various locations. You can review past severe weather events to determine what could have been done at certain times leading up to that weather event. And then analyze those impacts. What was the impact to life safety, to your tangible physical facility assets, your intangible assets, the idea that you were taken by surprise versus the idea that you were able to get ahead of an incident. And then develop some mitigating strategies. Come up with communication plans that can help with keeping people aware of what to expect, making sure you have the right resources in place. And as this presentation is going to largely be about, time-phased response planning. It's critical to know that the role of management is to anticipate and mitigate problems, and that means all problems. So we assess risk because it's part of the value function. Risk and return together come up with value. Every decision that we make or not make has some impact that increases, decreases, and preserves value. So proper leaders, we're going to do what they can to anticipate and mitigate that risk. There are a lot of standards associated with risk assessment. As has one that just came about last fall that I happened to work on, and it is a good outline on how to approach the risk assessment process. It does conform with the ISO 31000 industry standard for risk management systems. The activity is a three-part effort. You first need to understand the business, then assess the risk and the impact, and then develop the mitigating strategies. So in understanding your business, we need to know some things. What's the operational awareness of your environment? For example, is your building at sea level? Is it at 50 feet above sea level? Is it a mile from the coast or a river or some body that could flood? And then what are the weather and natural hazard sensitivities that you might have? Do you have personnel that work on high rigs and towers during thunderstorms? Do you have personnel that work in warehouses during heat or cold times? And then what are your operational timelines? Do you have specific things that occur certain times of the year that you need to look out for? Do you have a big turnaround coming for your plant? And then how do you communicate? Is it by email, text, in person? And then finally, we'd want to know how your personnel get trained. What kinds of activities do they do? Is it off-site training, on-site training, and so forth? And then we look at the different weather threats that might impact them. As I mentioned earlier, climatology reporting is very useful to help in assessing the risk, in that we can get a sense of the common threats for your location by type, by frequency, and start to build a pattern on how to mitigate and prepare your personnel for any of those kinds of things that might happen. Once you've done your risk assessment, you're going to have to determine, are you doing the right things? Are the existing controls acceptable? Are they adequate? Inadequate? Do we need to do more work? And then, of course, the consequence of that threat, that risk. Some things may happen all the time, like rainstorms, and because they're so frequent, you know that you are going to be able to respond to them because you have so much. So they might be on the negligible side. Something else, like a tornado, though rare for a particular facility, it is highly impactful. So those are the things you want to categorize those risks based on the consequence and the likelihood that they might happen. From there, you can start to build your risk register and start to plan mitigation strategies. So you compile the list. You then take a look at what kinds of actions you can take against those, and then you can come up with a timeline, a management timeline for a roadmap for how you're going to attack and address those risks. One of the mitigating strategies that I really like to impress on people is a time-phased approach. Your response planning can and should have a time-phased approach to it with respect to weather. The first step, of course, is determining when a decision can be made that will improve your resilience. You ask questions. How long does it take to evacuate? Well, it takes longer to evacuate from Galveston, let's say, than it does from Houston. Or some parts of Florida, it might take longer to fully evacuate, depending on the direction of the storm and so on. How long does it take to transfer operations to an alternate work location, or transfer your disaster recovery activities to another data center? What are your operating schedules? Are people on 8 to 5 jobs? Do they have 24-hour shifts? And are there any special specific events during the year that you would need to have an awareness for? Then you determine what actions can be taken. Always start with the easy things where you're checking contact lists. You start by confirming what people are doing in terms of vacations and where they're going to be. And you move through the time towards the more impactful actions that actually cause expenditures to occur and so on. Some common time frames to start with. Again, this all depends on the event and when decisions need to be made. But typically we see things for most weather events starting at 4 days out from onset, and then 2 days, and then 1 day, and then the event occurs, and then the activities that you would take once the, in this example, roads are cleared and the power is restored. Because what you're doing at those different phases is monitoring, then you're preparing the corporation for the event, then you're going to prepare people for the event. And always keeping communication open, and then, of course, recovering to normal business as quickly and safely as possible. So what are some examples of things to do? If we see an event, a threat coming 4 or 5 days out, these are some things that we would do. In fact, we have had ice storms where we've had 4 and 5 days notice. For example, we might find out on a Wednesday that Monday we're welcoming an ice storm to a particular area. What are we going to start to do? Well, we're going to ensure our contact and resource lists are current. We're going to take a look at our operational schedules to make sure that anything key or significant that was scheduled to take place on Monday is either postponed or strengthened so that it can happen. We're going to review available employees, their travel schedules, who's on vacation, with a specific eye towards your critical, mission-critical employees. And then you review procedures. What are your procedures for alternate work location activation? What is the office closure procedure and policy? Do people get paid? Do they not get paid? Who has the authority to close the office? All of those things should be reviewed and evaluated with HR and the appropriate personnel. Make sure that the folks that are involved in the response are comfortable and up to speed on using your mass notification tool. And if you don't have one, I encourage you to look into that. It's a very important thing to help an organization stay on top of any kind of evolving threat. To that end also, coordination of the alerting schedule was very important and key to let people know when they can expect to hear from you. If you can set up a schedule at the very beginning that says we're going to be briefing personnel at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. every day, and we will have a decision on office closures by 5 a.m. on the day in question, people can be more productive because they know you have it under control and they trust that they will find out what they need to know as soon as you can get it to them. Make sure you notify leadership that the threat's being monitored so they're not asking questions, they can stay productive, and the same thing with employees. And then finally, you establish a schedule perhaps for your executive briefings. Maybe you get together with executive leadership once a day to let them know what their plans are and to make sure you have their full support for any kind of decisions that you need to make. I prefer, as soon as something like this happens, to craft an incident action plan. It's what to do, who's going to do it, how do you stay in touch with each other, and what happens if someone gets hurt. And the reason you document this right off the bat is you've got your marching orders throughout the rest of this incident. You can share it with others, and then you have that peer review in place that makes certain you didn't forget something. And it's a good, useful tool following the end of the incident so that you can have something to debrief and conduct an after action on. So we're monitoring for a couple of days. We get to 2 days out. Now we start to do some things around corporate readiness. We might schedule with our weather provider some additional site-specific forecasts. You can set it up by the hour. You can set it up for certain times and get specific information that, such as temperatures and arrival times of rain or ice or snow. Make sure you discuss family needs and work availability. Got to have supplies for the remote location as well as your incident response team. I like to print copies of contact lists just to have them with me. As after you've made certain that they're all up to date and current, print them out, have them close at hand. The forms, may need to print some forms to conduct business depending on the nature of your operations. And it's good to distribute conference call instructions because you never know when you might have to have an ad hoc conference call and get people up in the middle of the night. And then you do the normal things. You maintain a full tank of gas, make sure that you have plenty of food and water at the house, and you make sure you notify employees with what they need to do to prepare and be aware of what's coming down the pike. And as we get closer, the day before, you might start to take some readiness precautions or instructions for employees. Make sure they take home what they need so they can work remotely. Make sure they verify that they can access this network remotely, those companies and organizations that have VPNs. They should have updated their emergency contact information because there may be an opportunity or a situation where you have missing in action situations and you need to address that. Try to find and locate your personnel. Make sure the alternate work location is up to date. That includes parking instructions, security codes, times for reporting, who to contact, those kinds of pieces of information. And external agency plans. This is where a liaison is very useful to you. If you have someone fulfilling that role, they can be monitoring what the local transportation, school districts, police, and so on, what they're up to and what they're saying. Communicate your messaging schedule, once again, letting everyone know when it is that you think you're going to be contacting them again and with what information. And you should have prepared some messages for various scenarios ahead of time so they can be approved by HR and legal and operations. And then that way you just fill in the very specific blanks, but you have a general template in place that is ready to go at a moment's notice. Then, of course, on onset, everyone should be hunkered down, safe and secure. You're going to get executive management's direction to close offices, yes or no. You're going to update, if you have it, your emergency message status center. That's an 800 number that a lot of companies have that employees can call into to find out if the office is open for business or not. What I mean by seek accountability is reaching out to your employees. One situation that I had recently here is a tornado came through a certain path in the Houston area, and I was able to send out a text message to employees that were in the path of that storm and ask if they were okay or if they needed assistance. Very useful for your incident management team so that they can apply their resources effectively. That way you're monitoring for anyone that might be in need of assistance. And then you're preparing schedules for when the damage assessment teams, if necessary, are coming into play. You're scheduling additional new line of communications to your various stakeholders, setting up incident briefings, making decision timelines, and so forth. Now, once the storm is passed, the roads are being cleared, the debris is being removed, you need to send in your damage assessment teams, perhaps, to impacted offices. You're looking at things like infrastructure, staffing and personnel needs, asset recovery. It's good to have some recovery contracts in place ahead of time, of course, so that you can just make a phone call and they have the resources to bring to bear. You may have records that have been damaged, gotten wet, or some other type of damage, so it's good to have a freezer truck, for example, on standby to come in and take care of that. Make sure at the when it's over, you go through a debrief of the incident. We call it after action reporting. You're going to review the incident communications, the responses that you got from personnel, and you're going to assess if you handled things correctly, and you're going to make updates and changes as appropriate. And so all of this comes to bring to bear so that you've got that time phase approach so that you are able to make certain that you are the last to close and the first to open that gives you a lot better stance in the community with your peers and with your customers, and gives you a leg up on the competition. So by simply looking at things in a time-phased approach, you're able to actually take some steps that prevent weather from being a catastrophic event for you. So at StormGeo Business Continuity Services, we have vulnerability assessments, which I touched on in this presentation, to help increase safety, reduce risk, and improve overall operational efficiency. One little note I'd like to add to this piece is that vulnerability assessments, where we're evaluating and doing those risk assessments, we often discover that there are some opportunities that can be exploited as well. An example might be a debris clearance organization or someone that provides generators. If we can let them know in advance that a storm is going to impact a certain area, then they're able to position equipment and goods and increase their bottom line and exploit that opportunity. Of course, we do business continuity services. Here at StormGeo, we provide support and consulting. We are big on hurricane drills and exercises to help update your response plan, and we provide a series of readiness programs and presentations so that employees as well as incident management teams are capable and ready to respond to any kind of threat that might come their way. And for more information, stormgeo.com, onshore business continuity. And of course, you can send me an email at impactready@stormgeo.com. And there's our phone number, and I'll turn it back over to Ed to see if there are any questions.
Okay, nice job, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have questions. I'm going to start right off on that so we don't waste any time. One person wanted to know, why would you need a freezer truck in an emergency situation like the one you were describing?
Ah, okay. Well, it's records, when they get wet, in order to recover them, you freeze dry them. And so we have a contract with a response company that is able to provide not just fans and mops and shop vacs, but they also can provide us with a freezer truck. So what they do is they come in, we give them the records that are damaged, wet, they freeze dry them, then they take them back to their facility and they do their magic and recover those documents.
Okay, very good. There's actually quite a few questions, so stand by. Let's see. Well, this is a good one. Is there really something I can do about the weather?
Oh, that is a great question. It's something I've become very passionate about. I just happen to have a couple of examples here, if I may. Hold on just a second, and let me show you a couple of examples. By doing that assessment that I described earlier on, we were able to work with some clients in different scenarios. We had a client that needed 4 days notice of a potential flood event. Actually, what happened was they were flooded. They had an impact. And in talking with them about that, they expressed some concern that, you know, if we just knew 4 days in advance, we could have started to take actions. We have a high water action plan. We could have done some things. So working with them, identifying what was in their high water action plan, we developed a critical flood alert. This gives them a notice of what specifically can be expected at their location, and it gives them a time frame so that they can start to, in their particular case, it was move product out of tanks and out of their pipeline and raise computer equipment out of their office. Another example had to do with winter. We have a client that has a very big concern about winter icing and their ability not just to their plant being iced over, but can their personnel arrive to assist with running operations. And so they have an icing response plan. We worked with them and we developed a trigger report for that gave them a heads up on when they could expect certain conditions to occur. So they could take actions then to make certain they had personnel on hand. Maybe they had a ride-out team that was going to stay in, so they had to lay in supplies like food and so on.
Very good.
We have another. I have a couple more that I want to show, though, because there's a lot of different weather conditions that can be given. You can get the heads up for. We had another client that needed 7-day notice of sea fog events. Now, this is different than the dense fog you see when you on land it burns off with the sun. This can close ports to shipping traffic. And so we developed the ability to give them a heads up when we were expecting a significant sea fog event. They could then take actions to move tankers in and out sooner or plan to move them out later, but they didn't get stuck waiting to find out what the pilots were going to do. And then, of course, hurricane response plans, trigger reports. Tying to your hurricane response plan, you know exactly what's going to happen, and you can also get an update on to when we think your next phase is about ready to occur. So yes, you can do things about the weather. You can take steps to mitigate those impacts. Thanks, Ed. Next question.
Yep. No, that was a good question. Is it only larger companies that can benefit from this kind of preparation, this kind of service, or can smaller companies sort of get in on it?
I think smaller companies are just as vulnerable to street flooding and tornadoes and earthquakes and hurricanes as anybody else. So yeah, I think everybody should be taking a look at how to respond to, in a timely manner, weather threats.
We have a response plan for hurricane season, but do we really need a plan for other types of weather threats and risks?
I believe so, yes. And it can be just a generalized plan. It is, something is threatening the office, something is, if it's an office setting, something is threatening a school, a factory. All of those things, you still can take steps to mitigate any kind of weather impacts. So I would suggest that every kind of weather threat should have a general plan that's phased, not unlike what I showed here.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Obviously, not the expert you are, but there's places where you have different kinds of weather. Obviously, I would assume you don't have, when you do that risk analysis, you're not going to, batten down the hatches for a hurricane if you're in Utah.
That's correct. That's why you do the assessment. That's right, Ed. Exactly.
Yep. Okay. How often should folks test their response plans?
We do a tabletop exercise every year for our hurricane response plan, and we do a disaster recovery exercise every year of a functional test of our DR plan. And I encourage everyone to follow a similar kind of calendar.
Okay. And this one is, I don't know if it's a joke, but it's pretty funny.
Okay.
Me, anyway. The person said, "Help, I have too much continuity budget, don't know how to spend it all."
All right, let me pull up that other screen that had my phone number on it. There we go.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears for a second. So this is great information, great presentation. We're definitely drinking from a fire hose. A lot of folks have asked, can I get a copy of the slide presentation? We get the we provide the recording, and I know we'll work out the details on all of it. Everybody will get a link to the recording. As far as the actual slide deck, we're going to find out about that. Neither here nor there. But we're going to continue for a few moments to leverage Ed and StormGeo so that folks, if they're interested, can learn what they do to reduce risk, boost productivity, sort of a what do the experts do and what do they offer? How to boost productivity with a weather response plan, best practices and vulnerability assessments, readiness programs and presentations like hurricane drills, general business continuity services. So if you don't mind, would you go through that for us?
No, that would be great. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Here at StormGeo, we, as I pointed out in the earlier slide, we have the vulnerability assessments that we will do for our clients, prospects. The weather services that we provide are global, and we're able to support organizations big and small and customize exactly what kind of alerting that they need. We support organizations that are in finance. We support retail. We support oil and gas, of course. And through our alerting and our our operations center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're keeping an eye on the weather around the world. We also have tropical services. We touch on every basin around the globe for monitoring cyclone activities. And earlier today, of course, we had a webinar on the outlook for the Atlantic Basin. And so it's really a customizable. It is providing weather guidance data for our clients to help make a difference in their operations as well as in their safety. Are there any questions that anyone has?
Yep. How can you ensure that your suppliers can meet their obligations for fuel delivery during a weather event or a long-term power outage?
Okay. The way we can, I think there's a couple of things going on there. One is how to ensure your supplier can continue to meet demand. One is if you can find out if your supplier is certified against any of the continuity standards. NFPA 1600, as is, has an organizational resilience program, and of course ISO 22301 is another one that's out there. If they are, that's a big plus. Often that's not going to be the case. So one of the things I recommend is that you conduct exercises for yourself, include your key suppliers. Make sure you have them as a part of your exercise from time to time.
Great. We obviously I work for a utility, and we have fuel contracts with multiple vendors, and then we also have contracts with logistics vendors that are they'll come in and they'll bring you fuel, but they'll also bring you a little city if you want, if you need to
Sure,
house
yeah.
a couple thousand linemen or whatever. And we actually used them during 2011 a couple times. So I've seen it work. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great question, and the fact that somebody's asking it means that they probably just need to do some footwork to talk to their supplier. There are fuel suppliers I know that specialize in sort of guaranteeing that you're going to get it on those worst days. Obviously,
That's right.
That type of a service is different than the local fuel oil company that they may be in the same boat as you when something happens, so you're going to pay more for a big company that's coming in from out of town or from out of state to bring fuel,
Right, and you probably bring them in on when you do exercises, don't you, Ed?
We do.
Yeah.
We'll have them participate either by phone. Sometimes they like to be in person because they kind of get a kick out of watching the large-scale exercises that a utility company does. But yeah,
Sure.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Let's see. How can you mitigate your supplier over committing their services to organizations similar to your own? How can I talk to them about how many organizations they're committed to? Where am I on their list? So I think what they're talking about here is if someone's promised to deliver fuel to 100 companies, and they're geographically, say they're regional and the whole region's affected, as an example, do they have the capacity to really provide what they've promised to so many?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question.
Any experience there? Yeah.
Due diligence is the big part when you're entering the negotiations, when you're first looking to secure that business. I think what you touched on, having an alternate, a backup, is good. But how you can ensure that the best thing is to make sure you have a service level agreement in place that is pretty onerous, so that if they don't get to you when they say they're going to, they have quite a penalty to pay.
Yeah. I know that some contracts, it's a contract kind of thing, as you said, in that they have different service levels that you can purchase. I know some of the companies that supply rolling office space and data centers and things like that. You can buy it a number of ways. One is you have a retainer and you're on a first come first served basis, and once they're out, they're out. Obviously, they'll try to get more. It's to their advantage as well. Or you're guaranteed, and the guarantee costs money because that means that they've dedicated equipment to you for the day that you need it, and you're at the head of the list. It just costs more. It's a great question. And I think that's it for our questions. We're coming up on about 40 minutes in. Ed, anything else you want to add before we close out? And I got a couple things for folks just before we do close out, but I want to check with you first.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to thank everybody for listening in. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and shoot me an email. And thanks for the opportunity.
Very good. So, folks, before you hang up, stick on the line for 30 seconds. We'll give you some valuable information. First, Ed, thank you so much. Thank you, StormGeo. Great presentation. And again, I'd like to thank ADG and their webinar experts for their support of our series. Thanks once again to Continuity Housing for sponsoring the ACP webinar series. Remember to visit continuityhousing.com. Leave a comment in the survey if you're interested how they can provide your critical employees guaranteed housing when they need it most. And similarly, leave a comment there if you'd like more information from StormGeo on any of the services that you might be interested in there. Be sure to watch the ACP website for future webinar information. And this question came up numerous times during the presentation. This and previous webinars are recorded, so the recording is available to members on the ACP website. Several people asked, can they have the presentation? And I know that they're working behind the scenes to make that happen. So if that's at all possible, it will happen. Make sure you put that or any other requests you have into the comments or survey fields when you get that survey. It pops up when you close out the browser after the webinar. And that includes a survey, so please answer the questions in the survey. It really helps us refine these productions and bring topics that people are interested in. So it takes about 30 seconds. And to all that tuned in, thank you very much and have a great day.